Okay, before I start, I want to ask everybody a question. Can you imagine being born and having to chase after your own identity? Or not being able to travel freely from one city to another? I will tell you my story, but first, I'll let you know how I came here. The meeting to come here to TEDx came between a meeting between the TEDx organizers in dialogue cafes in Lisbon and in Ramallah. The Dialogue Cafe is the first world video conferencing network where we bring people from all different walks in life to sit down and exchange experiences and knowledge. For us, as Palestinians, it serves as a bigger purpose because our movement is restricted and obstructed. But with Dialogue Cafe and one click of a button, I can virtually connect to 11 other cities around the world. I have virtually been to Lisbon many times, and I met great and wonderful people, and finally I came here and I got to meet them face to face. Because after all, that's what the Dialogue Cafe is all about. It's about connecting people. But being here for me wasn't easy at all. My journey did not just start last week. My journey started a long time ago. It was a journey that took a lot of twists and turns, confusion, restriction, and affirming my identity. When I was first told of the theme, One Past, What Future, I went home to discuss it with my friends. As we were discussing it, we came to realize none of us have a one past. We have all walked a different path in life to get us where we were. But even though we were different, we all had one thing in common: persistence. And I'll tell you my story of persistence, which started out with confusion and how 2 words changed my life. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon. And after the war in 1982, my family and I, we moved to Cyprus. And in later my teenage years, we moved to Malta. Naturally, being a foreigner in these countries, the first question I was asked was, where are you from? And this question confused me for years. I was born in Lebanon. I had lived in Cyprus. I was living in Malta. I have a Jordanian nationality, but I'm of Palestinian origin. I never lived in Jordan, and I had never visited Palestine. But at the time, 13 years old, I couldn't answer this question. And so my family and I, we moved to Jordan. And even though there, I got a sense of belonging, but there was still a little part of me that was missing. I still needed to find that missing part to feel complete. So I finished school, and I decided to go to Palestine on my own and to enroll in university there. This decision proved to be very difficult, and I took it in 1997. Now, as you know, Palestine is occupied, and because I'm a Jordanian national, it meant I have to have a permit, which is like a visa, to go from Israel to go into Palestine. And it wasn't so easy. I was denied this permit more than once. And finally, when I managed to get one, I made it halfway through, but I was denied entry at the Israeli borders. And when I questioned why, they told me, for security reasons. And I thought, security reasons? How was I going to university to major in English language and literature a security threat? But they didn't care less, and they stamped entry denied on my passport, and they sent me back to Jordan. These 2 words changed the course of my life. And I was only 18 years old at the time, and I wouldn't know until years later why I was a security threat. I was so close to Palestine, yet I was still so far away. And it reminded me of a letter to his son that was written by a Palestinian writer called Ghassan Kanafani, which said, I heard you in the other room asking your mother, Mama, am I Palestinian? When she answered yes, a heavy silence fell on the whole house. It was as if something hanging over our heads had fallen, its noise exploding, then silence. Afterwards, I heard you crying. I could not move. There was something bigger than my awareness being born in the other room, through your bewildered sobbing. It was as if a blessed scalpel was cutting up your chest and putting there a heart that belongs to you. I was unable to move, to see what was happening in the other room. I knew, however, that a distant homeland was being born again. Hills, olive groves, dead people, torn banners, and folded ones, all cutting their way into a future of flesh and blood, and being born in the heart of another child. Do you believe a man grows? No. He's born suddenly. A word, a moment, penetrates his heart to a new throb. One scene can hurl him down from the ceiling of childhood onto the ruggedness of the road. And so I wasn't about to give up. I applied for this permit again and again until one day I finally managed to get another one. And I went to Palestine. And the first 2 years, I had a blast. I was going around visiting the cities, every landmark in this new place I called home. I went to my mother's and father's house to see where they were born and raised. I was going back to my roots. But every 7 months, I had to leave back to Jordan and apply for a new permit. And again, it took the entire summer vacation for me to get a new one. Sorry. But there was something different when I was living in Palestine, something I was not used to anywhere else growing up. It was this question that I was always asked by soldiers every time I wanted to go from one city to the other. I was always asked for my Palestinian identity card, which at the time I did not have. And I was always questioned where and why I was going somewhere. And this reminds me of, you know the jokes, why did the chicken cross the road? Obviously, to get to the other side. But in my 3rd year of university, the Intifada broke out. The Intifada is the uprising against the oppression of the occupation. And checkpoints were scattered all over the West Bank. Every day, going from one city to another was a struggle. And I knew that if I ever were to go back to Jordan to apply for a new permit, I will be permanently denied entry. And so I decided to stay and get my bachelor's degree. And that's when I became an illegal alien in my own hometown. And for the next 8 years, the tiny city of Ramallah would become an open-air prison. This is Surda checkpoint. This checkpoint was located on the road going from Ramallah to Birzeit University. Birzeit University was only 20 minutes away. But with this checkpoint and a permanent army presence, it took us over an hour to get there, walking a kilometer in between rubble. Many times we were denied this crossing, but we were determined. You think this would discourage me from going to university, but my stubbornness wouldn't allow it. So instead, I joined the masses into the nonviolent resistance, and we were greeted with sound bombs, tear gas, rubber bullets, and at times even live ammunition. There are over 90 permanent military checkpoints in the West Bank, and over 500 obstacles to restrict your movement, whether it's a checkpoint, or a roadblock, or a barrier, or even a separation wall, which is our version of the Berlin Wall. But we kept going. When one road was blocked, we would find another one, and another one. If there's a positive side to this, we got to know our countryside very well, because we had very good taxi drivers who always managed to get us where we wanted to go. In the last semester of my university was probably the worst. In 2002, the entire West Bank was under curfew. And curfew meant that I was not able to even leave the house for several months. This curfew would be lifted every few days for just a few hours. So over the span of 4 years that I spent in Palestine, my movement became restricted from country to city to road to house. And the whole outside world became an unknown dimension to me. But again, we were persistent and we were determined. When this curfew was lifted these few days, The schools would open up their halls so we can take our classes there. The students came together to to help each other out. We supported each other in every possible way we could. And eventually, we managed to graduate. It was a little bit later than we originally planned, but we did it. Unfortunately, my parents did not come and see me graduate that day, but we had one heck of a party that night. I decided to stay in Palestine, and things went relatively back to normal. Things went relatively back to normal, but I was still confined to stay in the city of Ramallah because of my legal status. I was unable to go to any other city, and I was very afraid of being deported by the occupation back to Jordan. And it was a thought I couldn't bear to handle. The city of Ramallah can become very tight and very claustrophobic, and at times I thought about giving up. But with the help and support of my friends, I was able to get through it. And eventually, in 2008, I became free. I took my right to this Palestinian identity card, and I became legal. Naturally, the first thing I wanted to do is travel. I was so used to being confined in this tiny space that the whole world became very unknown to me. Traveling in Palestine is a little bit more complicated. Determining on the color of your ID card, it determines which path or which road you can go to. For example, if you have a blue Palestinian card, you can only leave from two places: a border in the north, the Sheikh Hussein crossing into Jordan, or you can fly through Ben Gurion Airport. If you have a green ID like mine, you can only leave through the King Hussein crossing. People in Gaza can only leave through Egypt. So can you imagine if there's a couple with different colored IDs? She has a blue one, he has a green one. They have to travel two separate ways. My friend, who lives in Gaza, which is only 1.5 hours away from me, had to have a wedding in Egypt because her family and friends from the West Bank are unable to go to Gaza. So instead, we had to travel to Jordan, and from Jordan, from Egypt, so we can have a wedding there. So you see, I live in a world where this occupation is forcing us to be categorized and separated, whether you're living in Gaza or the West Bank or historic Palestine, with the checkpoints and roadblocks and the separation wall. But there I was, sitting in my living room with all my friends, all different colored IDs, people who were born and raised in Palestine and those who were raised in other countries like me. We all walked a different path in life, but we all had one thing in common. We were all persistent. We all refused to be separated and categorized. We all refuse this injustice, and we all wake up every morning and we say no to the occupation. We live in a world where borders and barriers are separating us further apart. But with one click of a button in Dialogue Cafe, I can connect to people in the world to remind us that there is a bigger world out there, and to remind the world that we still exist. But I have a dream. I dream of a better world where the chicken can cross the road without having its motives questioned. Thank you.